Good afternoon. I'm Laura Culp, Tax and Wealth Management Partner and National Practice Leader for Sikich's Construction and Real Estate Group. On behalf of our construction and real estate team, welcome to the 2019 Construction and Real Estate Forum and Webinar. This year marks the 9th year for our forum, and we're excited that you could join us today. With expenditures reaching over $1.231 trillion, the U.S. construction industry is one of the largest markets worldwide. The real estate industry is also a significant contributor to the U.S. economy, with the U.S. commercial real estate industry growing by 2.6% over the past 5 years to reach revenue of $1 trillion in 2019. These industries are important to Sikich, as over 20% of our CPA revenue comes from our construction and real estate clients, and we continue to grow year over year. Within our practice, we are members of over 15 industry trade associations, and we have construction and real estate market leaders in all our offices. Today, we will discuss one of the hot topics worldwide, cybersecurity. Cybersecurity affects all industries and individuals. At Sikich, we are proud to have our own cybersecurity practice, and today we will hear from one of the best, Jeremy Mars, who is a manager in our cybersecurity group. Jeremy's background is in finance, and he also turned his computer hobby into a career. At one point, Jeremy was the world leader in a board game, and he even went to the UK for a tournament. But then he decided to get a real job. Jeremy has been with the firm for over 6 years and enjoys each day. Some fun facts about Jeremy. Shanghai is one of his favorite places in the world, and he took an elevator to the top of the Shanghai Tower, a 128-story mega-tall skyscraper, which has the world's highest observation deck. He also hiked 26 miles on the Great Wall of China, which is not a small accomplishment. Please join me in welcoming Jeremy.
So first, I'd just like to thank everybody for taking the time out of their day to come join us for this presentation. I know we're all busy, so I'm going to try to make this insightful for everybody, give you guys some good information to take back to your organizations, and arm you with some knowledge. As Laura mentioned, I've been with the Sikich IT security team for 6 years now. And in that 6 years, I have seen the cybersecurity landscape significantly change, literally on a year-by-year basis. 20 years ago, cybersecurity really wasn't anything anyone really had to worry about. And over the last 10 years, especially the last 5 years, and particularly the last 2 years, it has been just an ever-growing concern to where now it is one of the foremost thoughts on the minds of a lot of CEOs, CTOs, CFOs, et cetera. So just to hopefully give you guys a little bit better understanding into the hacker mentality and kind of what is going on out there, that was kind of the goal of this presentation and how you can help your organizations defend yourselves. It's nice. Normally I open these kinds of events with a quick quiz of the crowd of what industry verticals are represented. Pretty good idea today, so I really tried to kind of tailor some of this information to cybersecurity for construction and for real estate. So often when we think about breaches and hacks and things like that, we think about news articles about, credit cards being stolen or a certain credit reporting agency getting hacked and personal information getting out there. And oftentimes when I'm talking to, say, for example, manufacturers, they'll say, well, we really don't have any of that kind of information, so I don't think we're really a target. Last week I was in Michigan doing a pair of presentations alongside the vice president of the third largest insurance provider of cyber liability policies. And he called 2018 the year of ransomware. They paid out more ransomware claims than any other type of cyber claim in 2018. And the biggest target of ransomware is everybody that you wouldn't think of as being a cyber target: manufacturing, construction, real estate. You guys deal with huge dollar amounts, and that money moving from one place to another makes a very juicy target for the bad guys. So, without further ado, the goals for today's presentation. I live in a very technical world. I'm going to try not to use a lot of technical jargon in this conversation. I understand that we have a couple of IT folks in the room, but I'm going to try to avoid the IT speak. Try to teach you a few concepts of the hacker world and kind of what their thought processes are, give you some information that you can take back to your organizations, like I said before, and no fear-mongering. Or, well, I'm going to try to minimize the fear-mongering. I'm not entirely sure if I can do a IT cybersecurity presentation without giving a little bit of scary information. But again, the goal here is educate you guys, help you guys arm yourselves and your organizations. So, about Sikich and our security and compliance team. Not everybody knows that Sikich has an IT security team. So our IT security group is, our core group is based out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but we have actually consultants scattered all over the country. We have a 45-person team that this is all we eat, sleep, and breathe is IT security and helping clients defend themselves from the bad guys. We also perform what is called incident response and forensics work, where if someone is attacked or is hacked, is breached, we'll come in, help them identify how did the bad guy get in, what did they get access to, how did they exfiltrate that information, how do they protect themselves and close the hole so it doesn't happen again. Ideally, we want to help you on the front end before that happens, but if something like that does happen, please contact whoever you work with at Sikich, and they can put you in touch with us, and we can literally, I put guys on airplanes every day. You know, somebody will call me, for example, over the weekend, I took a call on my cell phone, and we had an agreement in place by Monday morning, and I had a guy on an airplane by noon on yesterday, and he's on site last night and today working with them to help them kind of stem the bleeding. So, definitely reach out for help. That's what we're here for. I don't know how much this applies to the construction real estate vertical. You guys really don't have too many compliance standards that you fall under, but we do also work with the entire alphabet soup of acronyms for various compliance standards out there that have IT security components to them as well. PCI, HIPAA, GLBA, FFIEC, et cetera, et cetera. So, why should you invest in your IT security? The simple statement is because it is not if you will be attacked, but when. And I know that sounds cliche, but it has absolutely become the truth in our reality in 2019. And I've been saying that for about 2 years now. So 2017, 2018, and it's even more true now in 2019. 2.6 billion records stolen. That stat comes from the breach level index. Nifty little website if you ever want to learn more about what the hackers are doing, who they're hitting, so on and so forth. These guys track breaches all over the globe. The 2.6 billion records, that's just from the US, and that's just for the first half of 2018. So by comparison, 1.3 billion records were stolen in all of 2016, and only 707 million in 2015. So you can see the exponential growth of the hacker activity. They're not going away. There's only more and more of them every year. It's getting easier and easier to become a hacker. If anybody's interested, for about $265 in the dark web, you can buy a kit. It will give you a couple of simple tools that you can scan for a couple of vulnerabilities and an instruction kit on how to exploit those two vulnerabilities. So, $265, you can become a hacker. $400 billion in stolen IP. This is a pretty staggering stat, and this stat I got directly from an FBI agent who works for the Eastern District of Wisconsin and specializes in cyber crimes. That's that's the FBI's estimate for 2017 on how much U.S. intellectual property was stolen and taken overseas as part of breaches of manufacturers and R&D companies and so on and so forth. Construction and real estate are both targets now as well. 2017, 2018, again, circling back to that concept of 2018 being the year of ransomware, it was also the year of wire fraud. Again, in your world, there are large amounts of money being moved to you, being moved from you, purchasing supplies, and obviously payments on contracts to you. These are all juicy targets for ACH or wire transfer, man-in-the-middle attacks, diverting those funds, so on and so forth. Trends. 2017, 2018. When I say 2017, 2018, I'm really talking about the back half of 2017 and then all of 2018. But midway through 2017 is where we kind of saw the next evolution in the hacker mentality take place. So, as I said, I've been doing this for a few years now, and what I would have told you even 3 years ago would have probably been build your walls nice and high, defend your business from the outside, keep the bad guy out, and you don't have to bankrupt yourself trying to do it. Just, it's the old adage of you don't have to be the fastest antelope, you just can't be the slowest one when the lions come around. So just kind of elevate your security above your peers, and you shouldn't have too much to concern yourself with. There's a whole new sophistication level to what we're seeing in the cyber crimes that we're investigating, the attacks that we're helping our clients defend themselves from. I am sure if I polled the room, everybody in here at some point or another has seen what's called a phishing email. It's that email that's trying to get you to click on a link, get you to open an attachment. Maybe it's telling you, hey, you inherited a diamond mine in Africa. Please just, forward us your banking information and we'll start wiring you funds. Most of them used to be really obvious. They're far, far more sophisticated now, and they're really hard to spot. Not trying to poke the executives in the room, but historically, it's the C-level group that tends to be some of the biggest perpetrators of clicking on the links, opening the attachments. You guys get a mountain of emails in a day, and as you're cycling through those, snapshot, and then going to the next, to the next, to the next, it's very easy to not take that moment, not do that extra due diligence on an email and click on something. This is where I'm saying it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. There's always going to be a human element to our organizations. As long as you have a human element, humans are going to make mistakes. The first time that mistake happens, the bad guy's in. The bad guy only has to be right once. You have to be right every time. So the moment that one misstep occurs, now you've opened the door. Now they've gotten in. Where I'm talking about the change in the hacker mentality and this change in the hacker trends, a couple of years ago, it was the smash and grab mentality. Door got opened, the bad guy gets in, he grabs whatever information he can, and he's trying to get back out before he's caught, raised any alarms, so on and so forth. Very different outlook amongst the hackers now today. They get in, and they don't go anywhere. They don't do anything, they just lay in the weeds. The current statistic is, it is roughly what boils down to 9 months that a hacker will sit in your environment before you even discover that they were there. 9 months of watching your email exchanges, seeing how different people phrase different things, how they end their emails, how, what opening phrases they tend to use, who's the person who communicates wiring money to this individual or to that individual, so on and so forth. And more importantly, how do the emails look that come from your vendors, that come from your customers, your clients, and understanding those patterns as well, so that when somewhere along the way I slip my email in that says, oh, by the way, such and such school district just changed their wiring instructions, and or such and such supplier changed their wiring instructions, or I slip your vendor in email that looks like it's coming from your email account saying such and such construction company changed their banking, here's our new wiring instructions, please forward all payments to this bank rather than the old one. I don't know if I have a slide in here on this, but I'm going to point this out. We live in a day and age where I have a teenage son, and I watch him sit with his buddies, and they're on the same couch 3 feet away from each other, and they text each other. I'm not sure when verbal communication became such a sin, but there is nothing wrong with asking a person a question. If someone sends you a message saying they changed their banking instructions, pick up the phone and call them. Ask them, did you really change banks? Are these really your new wiring instructions? You guys should have a policy in place that requires some kind of verbal confirmation on any changing of banking instructions for yourselves, for your customers, across the board. The other big trend that we saw is the shift in who's the targets. Don't get me wrong, there are still hackers every day that are going after credit cards. In our world, we kind of look at that as being the minor leaguers now. A few years ago, very big retailer with a big red circle for a logo. I think we all remember the Target breach. Probably one of the most well-known breaches in U.S. history. Prior to that breach, you could sell a stolen credit card for, the dollar amount shifted day to day on the black market, but assume somewhere, above $200, somewhere between, like, say, $225 and $260. Now you're pretty much floating around $6. So they're almost too successful. They destroyed their own market by just flooding the black market with stolen credit cards. But $6 adds up when you're talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of cards, so there are still guys going after them. The more sophisticated hackers are kind of going after new targets, and that's where we're seeing them go after healthcare. We're seeing them go after manufacturing. We're seeing them go after real estate. We're seeing them go after construction. In the past, you guys really weren't targets. I probably, would have told you guys, there's a few simple things you guys can do and you'll be fine. It's not really the case anymore. So really kind of the goal of this is just to get that information out there. So what's in it for the attacker? Kind of touched on some of this, but a piece that we all tend to forget is every business has employees. Manufacturers, construction, real estate, you guys tend to have a lot of employees. I can run an e-commerce business and have a global footprint, and I can do it with 3 people. Not a very big employee count. Construction company tends to have a lot of employees. Real estate, a lot of employees. Manufacturing, a lot of employees. Employee records, where I said you could get $6 for a credit card, you could get $600 for an employee record. With an employee record, I get a name, a date of birth, a social security number, an address, typically a current address, phone numbers, et cetera, et cetera. I get all kinds of pieces of information that I can sell as a block on the black market, or I can break it up and sell it in different pieces. Financial records, again, watching the money go in and out. Follow the money. It's always follow the money, and they will follow the money, and they will see where it goes, how it comes back, and they'll figure out where can I step in and divert that into my bank account. Insurance information is an odd one. Again, it's not the typical thing that we think of when we're thinking of hackers and where are they going after. Insurance information, again, is actually a pretty high price tag item on the black market. You could get $1,000, $1,200 a record for insurance information. There's not a lot of hacks that I consider evil, and obviously they're illegal, but I don't consider them to be evil or maliciously intended, except for the insurance hacks. Most of the insurance hacks lead to frauds that are just frightening. Crafting what's called a script that'll search through massive amounts of information for keywords. Looking for specific prescriptions that are associated with specific terminal illnesses, and then calling those people and saying, hey, there's a new trial in Johns Hopkins. There's only 50 available seats, and they're going to the first people at $25,000 a head. Do you want in? Well, anybody who's facing that kind of life-threatening illness is probably going to pay the $25,000. Again, it's just an elevation of what the hacker mentality has become. It's a hack that leads to a fraud scam that leads to, an even bigger payday. At the end of the day, most hackers, they're basically capitalists. They're looking for the biggest payout for the least amount of effort. Ransomware, fastest growing attack vector. For anyone who isn't aware of what ransomware is, ransomware, and there's sort of a sister to ransomware called cyber extortion. So I'm going to talk about both at the same time. Ransomware is I hack into your environment and I get in through an email, I get in through a IP address, let's just say, or a firewall that has some vulnerabilities that I can exploit. So I find that open window into your network, and I release a virus into your network that, I guess the best way to put this without getting too technical, is it multiplies itself and moves itself laterally through your network. So it jumps from machine to machine to machine, replicating itself and then passing the next one on until it's basically run across your entire network. At some point, I give it a command, or there's a built-in timed command. And when that command occurs, it encrypts everything, or basically it locks everything up. And this is military level encryption. This is the kind of stuff that once it's encrypted, unless you have the key, you are not going to unlock it. This would be like trying to get into the armored car with the butter knife. It's not going to work. So you are now faced with a situation where your entire network is locked up. No one can get into their laptops. They can't get into their mobile devices. They can't get into the servers, et cetera, et cetera. And the only thing you can access is a text file that says, "Hi, you've been hacked by so-and-so. Please pay me X amount of dollars, typically in Bitcoin, and I will unlock your systems." You have 72 hours. You have 24 hours. You have 12 hours. There is an amazing amount of information out there on the web about each and every one of us, about each and every one of our organizations. It is not hard as a hacker to do a little bit of research. If I'm going to target your company to go after you and try and lock up your entire company, it's not too hard to do a little research in advance. Try to find things like annual reports or articles about your company that maybe reference how much money you make, get an idea of what your annual revenue is, and then figure out how much does it cost you per day to be shut down. If it costs you $50,000 a day to be out of business, it's not that unlikely that you will pay me $150,000 to unlock your systems or leave you stranded. More often than not, more often than the FBI would prefer, businesses tend to pay the hackers. By the way, if you don't know how to buy Bitcoin, I would suggest learning how. I would also suggest, if you do not have a incident response firm on retainer, I would strongly suggest looking into that for your organization, whether it's Sikich, whether it's another IT firm.
Yeah, just a question. Are they getting into the database? Are they getting into your software? Are they getting into your website? Are they getting into your, what are they actually attacking?
So the question is, are they getting into your software? Are they getting into your database servers? Are they getting into your website? The answer is all of them. If I'm good and I get into your network and your internal network segmentation, which is basically the walls inside your network that kind of divide things up, if they're not that good, and to be honest with you, most companies that we test the first time, they're not that good, I can jump all over your network and get to what is called a domain controller, which is sort of the administration tool for your network. I can set up my own user account. I can give that user account super admin credentials, which means it can do anything. And I now have access to every machine in your network and anything that's connected to it. For your question, sir, maybe the only things that they're not going to get to are your website if it's hosted off-site, if it's hosted by a third party, potentially your backups. Your backups should not be in the same place as the rest of your network. The goal is they're your backups. You go to them if there is an emergency. So those should be somewhere separate. But
so in the world of ransomware, is there some honor among thieves where they actually unlock you afterwards usually, and or do they get the stuff off your system completely, or is there a future they can say another year they're going to just turn the switch back on if they pay more money?
So the question was, is there honor among thieves that the bad guys will turn your stuff back on if you pay them, and is there any guarantee that they won't hit you again later? That is an awesome question. So, believe it or not, there actually is a rating system on the dark web. So if you're working with an incident response firm, or if you're working with an attorney that kind of specializes in cyber crimes, they can go to the dark web if you know who has locked you up, and typically they are more than happy to tell you, their code name. So for our simulations that we do, we use a hacker named Afterthought. So let's just say that Afterthought has hit you and hacked your environment and locked everything up with a ransomware attack. You can go to the dark web, check out a rating, an eBay-style rating system on Afterthought, and it will tell you how often does he unlock systems after he's been paid. And the hackers tend to police themselves on this because it's in their best interest if people know who are the guys who pay and who are the guys who don't pay. Because the guys who, or excuse me, not pay, but unlock if they're paid. Now, these are bad guys. The term bad is before guy. So they're bad guys. That doesn't necessarily lend a lot of trust to what they're doing. Even though the rating system may say that Afterthought tends to unlock systems after he's paid, that doesn't mean that he's going to do it every time. That doesn't mean that Afterthought isn't making a payday both ways. I hack your environment, I lock you up, you pay me, and before I unlock you, I map out exactly how I hacked your network, exactly what tools I used, and exactly what vulnerabilities I exploited, and I put a post up on the dark web offering to sell it to the highest bidder. And now I get paid by another hacker before I unlock your system, so I get paid going both ways. And then you get hit a month later by the other guy who bought my system. That has become more and more common over the last 18 months to 2 years, again, with that whole evolution of the hacker mentality. It's all about making a buck, and they're going to make it every way they can.
You mentioned about creating incident response from a container. Now, most cybersecurity policies require you to use their firm to the policy. Do you recommend that you get a secondary or tertiary?
So the question is, I mentioned getting an incident response firm on retainer, and the question was, your insurance policy may require you to use a certain vendor. I wouldn't recommend getting a second or third vendor on retainer. What I would suggest is if you have a firm that you want to work with that isn't on the preferred list of your specific insurance provider, simply contact your agent and say, hey, I want to add these guys. We get requests all the time from insurance agents saying, hey, I work with such and such company. They want to add you to our preferred list. Could you please forward us XYZ documents? It's typically a very easy process. We can usually, put it together in a few minutes, email it off, and, within a few days, we're added to the list.
One of my clients got hit, and they actually read our cyber insurance policy and asked for a ransom amount that was $1,000 less than our deductible. So we paid it. It was cheaper for us to pay them than it was the insurance company. So just be careful on what you think your insurance policy covers, because they'll read that too. And you know what? They were very polite when they called. Very polite. Introduced themselves. They said who they were, what they did, and how much they wanted.
That's a great point. There's two really good points in there. First off, if you are ever in a situation where you are the victim of an attack, don't think that you can't communicate with the hacker. I would not suggest communicating with the hacker yourselves. I would suggest either having your attorney handle the communications, have law enforcement handle the communications, have probably the best choice, have your incident response group handle the communications. We handle communications with hackers all the time, and we understand how to handle those conversations to hopefully tease more information out of them, get a better idea of who they are, but also too, it gives you the opportunity to negotiate. For example, there is a entity in Wisconsin that was recently a victim of a ransomware scenario, and the bad guy basically gave them 48 hours to put the money together, and they wanted $75,000. And this wasn't a terribly big organization. And we basically explained to the guy, you know, they can't afford $75,000. They can pay you 40, but they can't pay you 75. Would you be willing to take 40? And they said, yeah, we'll take 40. And it was a negotiation on the time limit for them to actually put together $40,000. I've seen stuff get negotiated from, you know, 100K down to 20 to 25K. Again, if they think they're going to get paid and they think you're going to just go ahead and write the check, they're probably going to be willing to haggle with you a bit. Plus, it gives the opportunity, again, get more information about them, which you can then pass along to law enforcement. More often than not, these attacks are originating overseas, and there's not a lot that law enforcement can do about it, but they do compile databases. The FBI does share information with Interpol. I don't know if anyone saw the story last year about the Interpol arrest of 3 hackers that had been infamous 6-7 years ago and then had fallen off the map. They made their pile of money and they kind of, you know, went on to lead normal lives. And Interpol never forgets. And eventually everybody goes to Disneyland. And, you know, the hacker who's 24 years old and rocking the world all of a sudden gets married, has a kid. That kid gets old enough to say, Dad, I want to go to Disneyland. And they jump a plane to Paris, and sitting on the tarmac are numerous Interpol agents who pull the guy off of the plane in front of the entire crowd and family, and off away he goes in cuffs. So just because you're not getting a law enforcement result immediately doesn't mean that there isn't a database of information on these guys and it's being tracked over the years. But to circle back to what you were saying about your cyber liability policies, cyber liability is at this point still a bit of the Wild West in the insurance world. One policy to another can have significant differences. If you have a cyber liability policy, I strongly urge you to read that and be aware of what your requirements are and kind of what the potential pitfalls are within your policy. Some policies will tell you that you can get a premium discount if you perform certain security activities during the course of a year. A couple things I'll touch on in just a moment: vulnerability scanning, penetration tests. Other ones will say that your coverage is actually diminished if you are not performing these activities. I've seen policies that have said that they don't pay out anything if you have not contacted law enforcement. Other policies will say they will not pay out anything if you did not contact the agent when you became aware of the breach. So there are typically going to be things that you need to do for that coverage to be in full effect, and your team should be aware of them. Each of your organizations should have what is called a disaster recovery plan. In the past, disaster recovery plans typically were, what do we do if the tornado hits the office? What do we do if an earthquake occurs? What do we do if some catastrophic event entirely takes out our network? Your disaster recovery plan nowadays should have significant components to it surrounding cyber attacks. And what do? And you should build right into that plan 2 things. The steps that you need to take to make sure that you're following your insurance policy's requirements, and some templated media statements. They don't have to be very specific. They can just be very general. But my recommendation would be, don't use the word breach. It's always an incident. It is always a security incident that we are investigating. It's never, we believe we've been hacked or we believe we've been breached. Using the word breach takes it to a whole different level legally. and invokes a whole lot of legal notification laws and things like that. You may determine at some point that you have been breached, but for the moment, you want to call it an incident. So, I've got on the slide here command and control. Command and control, I mentioned cyber extortion. Command and control would basically be the same scenario. I get a hold of your network, I get in there, I start moving around, I make myself accounts where I can control things. Rather than lock things up, I just basically send you a message saying, hey, I have control of your network, I haven't shut you down, I'm a really nice guy, pay me some money. If you don't pay me the money, then I'm gonna crash everything and take it down. Or the scenario might be, I've gained access to all of your data, I've copied it, I have it, I'm going to publish it to the public if I'm not paid. I'm going to put it on the dark web for sale if I'm not paid. It's that whole, I'm in your network, I've hacked you, but I haven't done anything malicious yet. I'm offering you the opportunity to buy me off before I do. So how do you protect yourself from all these hacker activities? Three things. And by the way, there's far more that you can do beyond these three things, but these are the three things that every organization should be doing. Vulnerability scanning, penetration testing, and security assessments / security and risk assessments. By the way, I'm going to hop back to this for just a moment. These three things, by the way, I mentioned, requirements in cyber policies. These are the three most common security activities that we see as requirements in cyber liability policies, or as activities that could potentially get you a premium discount. Again, it's going to depend on the provider. I'm going to do the rah-rah for Chubb, big cyber liability provider based in Cleveland. So since we're in Ohio, I'm going to do the big rah-rah for Chubb, but I do actually like Chubb's policies. In that wild west of policies, Chubb has some underwriters that put together cyber liability policies that make sense. They don't have some crazy requirements that are, there are some policies that you want to look at your policy. For example, I have seen a policy that said that a ransomware demand being paid will not be covered by the insurer if you have not gotten law enforcement's approval to pay the hacker. Now, I don't think that was maliciously written. I think it was just written by an underwriter who doesn't understand the cyber hacker or cyber security landscape, in which law enforcement is never going to give you approval to pay a bad guy. They may say it out of the corner of their mouth or kind of give you the wink, wink, nod, nod, but they are never going to give you anything in writing that says pay a bad guy money. So in effect, it's made a policy in a position where it's never able to actually be claimed on. So vulnerability scanning, what is it? I'm sure everybody in the room is aware of what an antivirus program is. You run it on your laptop. Some of you may run antivirus programs on your mobile devices. By the way, good thing to do if you're not doing it. Vulnerability scanning is kind of the same concept, except it's for your business network. Where an antivirus program is scanning that laptop, that workstation, that mobile phone, tablet. This is scanning IP addresses, firewalls, and all of those various ports that are on an IP address. So the IP address for your business, or IP addresses, have hundreds of ports. These ports can be opened, closed, turned on, turned off. And by scanning that IP address, I can view the traffic that's moving through those ports, and I can tell you pretty darn accurately what operating systems you're using, what server softwares you're using, what types of web applications you're using, et cetera, et cetera. I can also tell you what versions of them they're using, whether they've been patched or not. And if they haven't been patched, then I know what vulnerabilities you didn't patch to protect yourself from. If I know how to exploit those vulnerabilities, now I know how to get in. Sikich has a proprietary vulnerability scanning tool that we've been using for over a decade and kind of building and expanding. It scans for over 80,000 vulnerabilities. It's probably one of the most robust scan tools that I know of on the market. But the bad guys have kind of stripped down versions of scan tools themselves. We're scanning for 80,000 vulnerabilities because we're trying to scan for all the vulnerabilities that we know of from our investigations and forensics work and so on and so forth. The bad guys are just trying to scan for a handful that they know how to exploit. So they've got a few tools that basically kind of run the same concept, and they're basically picking, let's say, the Cleveland-Akron area. I'm going to pick 50. Your IP addresses for your business are public record. They're like the address on your house. But the public record of your IP addresses just gives a geographic area it's associated with. It doesn't specifically say what business it is. I can do a little bit of research and figure out what business it is, but it's easier for me to just pick a geographic area and say, here's 60,000 IP addresses in the Cleveland-Akron area. I'm going to begin scanning them for this group of vulnerabilities that I know how to hack. And then I'm going to go play 18 rounds. Or 18 holes, excuse me. 18 rounds would be a really long time. 18 holes. And then I'm going to come back from that, and I'm going to see, what did I find? Well, here's a list that popped up that have the vulnerabilities that I'm looking for. I don't know who they are. I just know that they have a vulnerability that I know how to hack. And then I'm going to begin hacking those. And once I get in, then I'm going to poke my head in, the prairie dog scenario. I'll poke my head up, look around, and see what I see. And, oh my gosh, I'm in Equifax. And there's millions upon millions of credit reports sitting there waiting for me to just grab and run off with. This is the scenario of how the Equifax breach occurred. There was a Cisco vulnerability. And by the way, the software publishers are very good about publicizing the vulnerabilities that they know of and trying to alert you, hey, there's a security patch for this. We saw this, we fixed it, here's how you fix it. Cisco publicized the vulnerability, here's the security patch to fix it. Whether the security patch was downloaded and just didn't install correctly, or whether it was never downloaded, I don't know if we'll ever get the real details on that, but the fact is the vulnerability was there. Bad guy get in, probably had no clue where he was getting into, and the rest is history. Vulnerability scanning is meant to stop something like that from happening. It scans your system, identifies those vulnerabilities, and red flags them for you, and then gives you instructions on how to fix them. Whether it's download an update, whether it's install a security patch, whether it's close a port that's open that shouldn't be open, whatever the case may be, it's basically meant to help your IT team and help your staff manage the plethora of vulnerabilities that are out there, and new ones crop up every single day. Softwares go end of life. Things are no longer supported. New vulnerabilities arise with different hardware, softwares, et cetera, et cetera. You could have a person on your staff working full-time and overtime around the clock just trying to keep track of the new vulnerabilities that are popping up. Let the tool do it for you. That's its purpose. That's why we run antivirus programs. Realistically, I have heard it estimated that if you're doing monthly vulnerability scans, it should eliminate around 80 to 85% of the cyber threats to your business. And I'll tell you point blank, there's nothing that is ever going to be the silver bullet. There is no 100% protection. Anybody who tells you that, they're just trying to sell you something. There isn't a perfect security solution out there. The goal is you minimize your risk and then you defer the remaining risk through things like a cyber liability policy. But the goal is try to minimize that risk as much as possible. For anyone in the room who does take credit cards for any goods or services that their organization performs, you fall under a compliance standard called PCI. PCI requires these scans to be done by what is called an approved scanning vendor. There's only a limited number of scan tools that are certified to be an ASV. Our scan engine is an ASV, so we can help you guys with that. And vulnerability assessments, they do not include attempts to attack an environment or to exploit any of the vulnerabilities. It's just identifying what it sees. It's an automated tool. There's no one thinking behind it, but it's a very good automated tool. Penetration testing. Penetration testing is the next step up. This is where a human being gets involved. I have a crew of guys on my team who all they do is hack our clients for a living. And we get paid to hack our clients. Why would you pay us to hack you? Because if we hack you, we can tell you how the bad guys would hack you and help you stop it from happening. The goal is proactively protecting yourself from the exploits that a bad guy would use. Realistically, in today's day and age, every company should be doing this at least once a year. Every security best practice standard out there is going to tell you to do it after any significant change to your environment, but I would be content if everybody just did it once a year. Far too many companies only do a penetration test of their network once every 3, once every 4 years. Some don't do it at all. This is going to eliminate a significant number of sophisticated attack threats. This is how you're going to identify where are the weak areas inside your network, not just on the outside, but where are they on the inside, so that when someone clicks the link, opens the attachment they shouldn't have, and they've let the bad guy in, this is how we can help your team identify where the weak areas are in how the network is designed and help your guys build those internal walls. The best analogy I can make to it is picture a honeycomb. You've got all of these little pockets within a honeycomb. The concept is if you build your network that way and the bad guy does get in, he's stuck in one little pocket and he can't get to all the other pockets because there's all these little honeycombs of walls in between. And by doing this, you have now isolated the bad guy and kept him contained to a very small area of the network. Yes, maybe he compromised a workstation, but he didn't get to the servers. Or maybe he compromised a single server, but he wasn't able to get to the rest. He wasn't able to get to the backups. He wasn't able to get to the financial information or whatever the case may be. You kept him contained to a small area, which also makes it much easier on your team to recognize that something fishy is going on, and we'll raise some red flags, identify the threat, eradicate the threat. There are different types of pen testing. External obviously means we're going to attack your network from the outside. Internal network testing, this is where I'm talking about where we're going to help your team kind of design those internal controls, things like that. Web application testing is specific to testing websites, testing the kinds of applications that are public facing out to the world. And by the way, those make great entryways for bad guys to use to get into your network. This kind of goes for IT guys in general, but software developers especially. We run across tons of guys who are phenomenal software developers. They're great at writing code to build somebody a website or build somebody an e-commerce platform or whatever the case may be. They're just not very good security guys. Same thing goes with IT. We work with clients who have incredibly bright network admins and such. And this gentleman and I were talking about it earlier. It's sort of like, you know, the healthcare field. I have a general practitioner that I will go to, you know, if I think I've got an ear infection. This is probably not the doctor that I want performing open heart surgery on me. Obviously, the healthcare field has very specific verticals within it. Same concept within IT. The last service that I want to talk to you guys about that you really should be doing, this isn't an annually recurring thing. This is the kind of thing that you kind of do once every few years. But if you haven't done a security assessment on your organization, you really need to. And whether it's Sikich or whether it's another firm, whoever it may be, this is where you're going to be able to understand your baseline of where your security is at. And that's what's going to then allow you to accomplish any security initiatives that you want to implement. I guess the adage is you can't get to where you're going unless you know where you are. And that's really kind of the goal. That's what a security assessment really kind of sums up It's going to, a good security assessment is going to include what's called threat modeling, where we will look at your organization, what kind of information you have, what kind of industry vertical you are in, and really try to map out what are the attack vectors the bad guys would use to go at you, what would they go after, how well is that information protected within your network. Potentially it's the network itself that they're going to go after for like ransomware or cyber extortion. How well are those internal controls positioned to keep that bad guy from moving laterally within your network and taking things over. This is, again, not something you're going to do all the time, but it's probably the best first step in building an information security program in the modern age. Here we are in 2019 with where the hackers are at. This is really kind of that first building block on where you're going to be able to then build the rest of your security initiatives moving forward. That kind of sums up what I wanted to talk about as far as kind of where the hackers are at in 2019 and what you can do to protect yourselves from that. Obviously, all of you have a connection with Sikich. Please, at any time, feel free to reach out to that connection that you have within Sikich, and they can get you connected to our team to help you out with any situations, questions, so on and so forth. And we are always happy to help in any way that we can.
Thank you, Jeremy, for doing a great job educating us on how to protect our companies from cyber hacks. If you would like more information about our cybersecurity services, please contact me at laura.culp@sikich.com or your Sikich advisor. Thank you and have a great day.